Chad Peterman here, and you are listening to Can't Stop the Growth, a platform for leaders and teams to grow and thrive. We highlight the importance of personal development, pursuing greatness, and always chasing your potential. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to another episode of Can't Stop the Growth. I'm your host, Chad Peterman, and today I have what was a new friend only a short time ago and has become a really valuable partner for us here at Peterman Brothers. Their team's been on site. We had people there in New York with them, but really excited about what he and his team, his co-founders, are doing in the technology space. I think there's so many shiny objects here as contractors that are out there and people offering solutions, and I'm sure there's a lot of great ones, but I think these guys have really hit the nail on the head with how they're attacking it and trying to help contractors. So without further ado, would like to welcome Mr. George Eliadis to the podcast. George, how'd I do on the last name there? I totally spaced it.
Yeah, that was it was a little creative, but it works.
All right, cool. All right, well, we'll go with that. You told me how to say it, and then I did the introduction. I totally forgot, and then I looked at it on the podcast, and I'm like, oh God, what have I done here? So sorry about that.
All good. It's Eliadis for the listeners.
Yep, all right. Yep, cool. I threw in a couple extra letters. All good.
All good. Yeah, Chad,
how you doing, my man?
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Good. Glad to have you. Those of you that are maybe seeing the video version, George rocking a sick mustache right now. Looking good, man. I like it.
I appreciate it, man. We were doing an onboarding in Northern Kentucky. I don't know if you know Brady and the Jolly Guys in Wilder,
absolutely,
just south of Cincy. And they were it was the first week in November. They were doing Movember, and a bunch of us, not just myself, were repping it and supporting them in solidarity. So we all grew stashes. I kept mine into December, clearly.
Absolutely. Well, I would imagine that most of our listeners by now have heard your name, have heard about ProBook, all the things that you guys are doing. I guess maybe to get started, maybe kind of give us kind of your guys' origin story. I mean, I've heard it many a times, and your guys' scrappiness and just willingness to get in with the contractor and figure out what are the problems and how can we help solve them, I think are just, outstanding. But yeah, give us kind of the origin story of ProBook, and then maybe kind of give us a little bit of a teaser of, where you guys are heading, and we'll kind of dive in from there.
Yeah, 100%, Chad. So, origin story, I actually used to be a contractor. I pressure wash houses in upstate New York where I grew up. Grew up in the Hudson Valley, which is about an hour and a half north of New York City. And I was spending 2 to 3 hours a day just doing window time, running my pressure washing business, my dad. We covered about 6 counties. So it wasn't uncommon for us to, start at home base, get our first call 45 minutes north of there, get someone else to call us in for an estimate, 45 minutes south of where we lived. So we have to go, 45 minutes back, and then another 45 minutes. And by the end of it, we were just, one truck effectively. I was just driving all over the map. So I got to school, and I was studying engineering. I'd always been entrepreneurial, like even before that. I ran a few, small businesses growing up. And I thought, what if I could build some software to cut my driving time down, basically? And it turned out that pressure washing is, as an industry, a bit more chuck in a truck, if you will, relative to, our space right now. Those guys don't really use a whole lot of software. Like my dad, probably never going to use software, right? It's going to be pen and paper. And it's going to stay that way. So it was just really hard to build any software of value in the power washing space, just because it's got some different dynamics. So one of the lessons I learned in like one of the first startups I tried was, validate the market for what you're looking to do first, because it's very easy to just start with a solution to a problem that doesn't exist, right? I've fallen into that trap. Pretty much every founder I know has before, and it's just part of the growing pains of starting something up. So ended up pivoting to painting for a bit. Shout out to this company, Nolan Painting in Havertown, Pennsylvania. They were our first customer ever, our first paying customer as well. We built a scheduling tool for their estimators, and they were, probably the largest like non-franchise, non-CertaPro painter in the Northeast that I knew of at the time. And, they had 100 something painters, but painting is like an install, right? You're there multiple days, multiple guys in a crew. There's not a lot of travel time. So the problem that I was experiencing was just not relevant in painting. They had, 5 or 6 estimators, but, and those estimators were effectively salespeople running, 4 or 5 leads a day. But they're the largest in the Northeast that I knew of, and they only had 5 estimators. So there just wasn't a whole lot to go around in painting, right? It's as if in the average painting company, the owner is like the only and primary estimator. And you're not going to optimize like the owner's schedule, right? He's going to take all of the leads and take the most valuable ones. So painting, although, we found an eager partner early that we give a lot of credit to, and just, keeping us really engaged and interested in the space, ended up not being the greatest long-term fit. So ended up doing some more discovery, started talking to more and more like local contractors in the Philly area where I was going to school at the time. Got a few on-site visits that, didn't really go anywhere. I was really just trying to learn at the time. So I made it down to ACA in New Orleans in 2023. That's where I met Brian and Jim Sloan from TR Miller and those guys. And I also met Josh Campbell from Rescue Air. And those were kind of like the OGs in our world. And I remember they actually invited me both. They both invited me down to their shops to kind of like see their operations. There's one other gentleman, Brad Bacon from Bacon Plumbing in Rockwall outside of Dallas. I also got to tour his shop, met his dad, saw the whole operation, saw the gym they had, and basically realized that, travel time, which is my problem, is not really that relevant in home. I mean, I take that back. It's relevant, but it's not the primary factor. Obviously, right tech, right call, as we all know, is really where it's at. But I did those on-site visits, and they were all super, super helpful for learning. But I remember I was at dinner with Brian from TR Miller, and he asked if I wanted to spend some more time there learning their business. So I ended up spending, a good amount of that summer on site at TR Miller in their call center, in their, dispatch center. They have it split up between Plainfield and Bolingbrook. They've got like their shared services with the call center in Bolingbrook, and they've got their field staff in Plainfield. And I dug into the weeds and into the details and just realized that there's a lot more nuance in right tech, right call that I wasn't aware of. So after that, we worked to launch our first version of ProBook, and it took us a while. Like, there's a lot of failure, a lot of trial and error. Really, really my thoughts go out to those guys and, some of our other early partners that really stuck through it with us, because we had a lot of learning to do. But one of the big learnings that stuck with me is that dispatching is extremely, extremely detail oriented. You have to be in the weeds, and you can't win without being in the weeds. Right? You can't build a successful product if you're not down in there. So when we like really, really were ready to launch for real, our real launches started in, April of 2024. We started this new tradition where we just started onboarding every single one of our customers in person. So the last summer, Ben, my co-founder, and I, we just traveled, we road tripped the country. I mean, graduated from school, immediately went, Pennsylvania, upstate New York, Colorado, Alabama, all in like the first like 2 weeks. And we just were traveling all summer, all the rest of the year. I remember like last November, which is just about a year ago at this point. We had to do I had to be at 4 onboardings in a week. So I like went down to Miami area. Then I missed my flight to Jacksonville, so I had to rent a car and drive up to Jacksonville at night. I was already like really sleep deprived, and that was 4 or 5 hour drive, and head up to North Carolina. So a lot of miles. I should have more status than I do. For some reason, my flights don't add any miles, but that's kind of the origin story. We've just stayed like really true to embracing that. We have to be in the details to make things a success, and that's been our operating model. And a lot of people say, hey, that doesn't scale. And we're on a mission to prove that wrong and keep the white glove going.
Yeah, no, love it. Let's I want to highlight all the things that ProBook does, but I also want to, for our listeners, kind of highlight some tactical stuff that they can be thinking about as it relates to whether they use ProBook or not, things that they should be thinking about when it comes to effective dispatching. What were some of the things you saw early on that were like, oh my God, like I get it needs to be detail oriented in order to, pull this off. Yes, I get that to be true. what were the things that you guys were like setting out to solve that are still true today, that if you implement ProBook in an organization, what things are it what's it going to make easier for a company's dispatchers?
Yeah, but actually it goes further than dispatchers, right? Like it starts with the service manager who has to pull a batting order every week for his, techs, right? When you're, at Peterman scale or you're, not at Peterman scale, right? Batting orders are the lifeblood of dispatching for dollars. And a lot of shops were pulling, simple batting orders. They were pulling, HVAC, this is my hot list, right? This is my best 10 plus guy. These are my maintenance techs. There's also just a lot of nuance at different, different job types and tags as they exist in service site, right? When you think cross trade, simple batting orders are just don't really like they can get some of the way there, but they're really hard to scale. You have to constantly pull them. And it's hard to actually align on the right number of what a batting order means. Like the number one thing I kind of have learned was like a lot of people are pulling their HVAC batting order off of, revenue. Maybe they had a flip rate, alongside of that. But there's also techs who flip a lot of low quality leads that don't end up selling, right? So we had to come up early on with a way of unifying the two. And what we call it, internally is blended dollars per door knock, which is like, let's look at what a tech is sold in repairs. Then assuming they're not, a selling tech model and they run comfort advisors, let's look at how many dollars their leads have sold for into systems, right? Because you can flip a whole lot of leads that don't end up being productive. You're actually burning customers if you do that. So if you blend repair sales with turnover sales over calls ran, you get like a true picture of, who's converting on repairs, who's also setting leads, but not just setting leads, setting high quality leads that ultimately close, and who's taking care of the customer at the end of the day. So service managers not having to worry about batting orders, biases in batting orders. A lot of times batting orders were just like written on paper with no metrics that we pull service site and data is just, completely different. And I think the next piece is like dispatchers get overwhelmed. It's one thing to have, a regular day and you've got, normal amount of calls and, you're moving them around. Maybe you set the board and you go do other things. When you're really busy, like I remember we had a snowstorm 2 years ago, January of, basically 2024. I remember, Tierra Miller, Brian actually like made a LinkedIn post about this. They had more demand calls than they'd ever seen before. And they had some techs running 8 calls a day. And they don't usually run 8 calls a day, right? That's, not at all their practice. It just happened to have, 3x the amount of calls they had capacity to run. And, we're able to just route their techs to the right opportunities and do it in a really like route efficient way. And dispatchers are just ripping their hair out when it's, absolutely slammed and it, becomes 10 degrees all of a sudden after a long weekend. So I think on the high stress days, we helped them out a bit and we helped them just be, less complacent because it's easy to set the board and forget it out of necessity because, it's hard to communicate with customers and do all these other admin things you probably have to do. And on top of that, always be questioning the board as far as like, what's the right way to do it. So there's just a lot of problems and it's just a perfect problem for a computer to help solve and really, elevate our people to do the high value things that the computer can't.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, the biggest thing is like you mentioned batting order. There's a lot of companies that don't even have a batting order. It's just, a free for all of who can go run what tech or they're routing them geographically or whatever it is. So I think, yes, you need to have a batting order. That's step one. And I think, ProBook being able to look at all the data points. When you think about it, people that are, against AI and all of this stuff, well, my dispatcher can do it better, so on and so forth. There's no humanly possible way that they can look at that much data in one single sitting and make a judgment call. I know when we first went live, what was that, into May-ish? I can't remember. Into May, you get the pushback from the technician. Oh, this thing it went this way, it didn't go that way, whatever it was. And it's like, guys, it wasn't perfect when there was a human involved. It's not going to be perfect, but the hope is better as it learns. Tell me a little bit about how, like, maybe just a little like 101 class on like how AI works, like, because I think that's still somewhat of a concept that a lot of people are struggling with when they implement and they're like, well, it doesn't work. And I'm like, well, how long have you been doing it? Like 3 days? It's like, well, Yeah, okay. We can give it some time here. You got to train it. So, like, give me the 101 on like how it actually learns.
Yeah. Well, what I'm about to say is probably going to be a little controversial here because
Okay, cool.
a lot of people's preconceived notions, and there's like AI in the sense of like Gen AI, which we can talk about, which is, your ChatGPT, your Anthropic that can, take text and do like, natural language processing on it. And then there's more traditional machine learning that is, making predictions. And at ProBook, we incorporate both. And the big misconception, the big controversial, thought I want to squash is that, let's just say in the context of dispatching right tech, right call, AI has to have this like learning period. And what I mean by that is before we go live with dispatching, we show you the batting order that our model predicts. We show you we have a heat map and it looks at, tech performance by job type and by tag. And we literally align with you tech by tech. Is this the batting order that you guys subscribe to? And sometimes, there's discrepancies and we dig into why those are the case. But we train backwards in historical data from day one because, we don't want to dispatch not to right tech, right call. And so the big misconception, at least in the dispatching phase, is that yes, there's ongoing learning because your batting order is going to change and your techs are going to continue to run more jobs and we'll get more performance data on that. But when you set up like automated dispatching, at least as long as you have historical data, you should have a good enough baseline to perform well. I think what you might be, what you're getting at is, more traditional generative AI, which, is more attuned to your chat GPT, which, OpenAI has been training that on, tons and tons of data in the background. And there's, ways and avenues to enhance that. But I think in this practical setting today in the trades, the real opportunity is like really strong setup and really good expectation setting. That by far that accomplishes the most by far. And what I mean by that in particular is like, when you set up like an AI CSR, for instance, the AI CSR provider should understand all of your business requirements and take that into account as they're building out your agent. It shouldn't be, launch your CSR and then discover, this business fact. And then this way, this operating model, it's like, it should understand how you guys run capacity, how you override capacity when you have valuable jobs that, you want to run, even if you might not otherwise have capacity for in the business unit, how you, handle on call and all these other things, what your policies are for certain things. And so I think it's on the onus is on the provider to collect the right information, right? Like it shouldn't be on you to, train the agent. At least at our thesis and ProBook, we're very big on white glove and just delivering an outcome. You partner with us for an outcome, not to, dial in the outcome over, 9 months. Understanding all of the business logic is very important. And I would argue, critical to having a success. And then the latter part of that is expectation setting. A lot of people don't actually think like, what metric, what number do I want to improve after launching this, right? They just, it's a shiny object to your point. So we're very, very intentional about understanding like, what are your goals? We push, into our customers actually to get them to give us goals, right? Because sometimes it's not always clear. Because that's how you set everything up for success. And I know, maybe getting a little bit away from the question, but in the practical use cases, you think automated dispatching, call taking, outbounding, and these other things that are, central front office workflows. A lot of the learning can happen up front by training on good historical data and, setting up the agent with the right business logic. If you're building a CSR, having access to the same materials you would use to train a live agent, that's all really important. And you've got to couch it with really clear upfront expectations if you want to win.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know you started off the conversation by kind of stating, hey, I was power washing with my dad. I was trying to, decrease kind of my drive time, different stuff like that. I guess what is the bigger thesis? Because let's be honest, a lot of these quote unquote technology AI companies have started in the call center, right? They've all started with, hey, we can answer your after hours calls. We've got agents, all of this stuff. You guys started in dispatch, which I don't know that a lot of people have started or have thought to start in dispatch. What's kind of the thesis behind that, and why do you feel like that thesis maybe sets you up for success down the road?
Yeah, it's one of my favorite questions to think about. And by the way, starting with dispatch was not this like grand master plan. Like dispatching was just the pain that I felt when I was running my business. But
Yeah. It's all right. You
you
got
know,
a little lucky. That's fine.
yeah,
Everybody
yeah,
does, right? You got to have it.
yeah, exactly. So, dispatching is I mean, just to be frank, dispatching is the hardest problem in this kind of like problem space to solve, because the amount of flack we've caught from service managers over the past 3 years and getting ProBook dispatching right is off the charts, right? Because service managers are really close with their techs, and every minute of drive time gets relayed back to them. And obviously drive time and revenue are at odds with each other at times. And so we've gotten a ton of feedback. And so we started dispatching out of, luck, as you kind of pointed it out. And then we realized that when you do dispatching, you have a really strong data model to solve these other adjacent problems, like, call centers you kind of mentioned. One of the best examples I have is existing appointments and non-leads, right? I don't know what percentage of your guys' inbound traffic roughly or non-leads, non-bookable opportunities, just folks, asking for an ETA, asking where their parts are at, something like that.
50% of them.
Yeah, 50%. And we see 40%, we see 60%, but 50% is a pretty average number. And by the way, that starts in dispatching, because dispatching needs to give your customers good proactive updates, and that's really hard to do at scale. By doing dispatching, you can actually address 50% of your calls way better than if you don't do it, because when a customer calls in asking where their tech is at, our voice agent can now have context on what's going on in dispatching and actually, resolve that situation in the first call, rather than having to have it escalate to dispatch because, some other agent doesn't have context. And so by doing dispatching, you have context on the dispatching, you have context on job values, right? Which is really important in the context of rescheduling. And, when you're busy with demand and having to bump tune-ups, you have context on customer communication, because there's a customer communication aspect implicit and inherent in dispatching as well. And so, because dispatching is so central and it's like the hardest problem, everything else is just like way easier as a result. So we're able to build, a voice agent way faster than it took us to do dispatching. And so now we have an agent that can, handle those non-leads, the 50% of your volume on first call. You have a higher containment rate. You have to, throw less back to the call center. And that's a really big win. So I think dispatching just gives us a lot of context. And because it's so integrated with, how much jobs are worth and, how jobs get distributed, we can also, forecast demand better and do better outbounding for tune-ups, right? There's just a lot of information that doing dispatching gives you. And then you can build better, better everything else. Like maybe to just like drive this home, a great example is, let's say you've got a husband and wife that, is a customer of yours. And, our dispatching tool is texting them, trying to get a hold of them to say, hey, please confirm in the next 10 minutes. Your tech is ready to head your way. Text C to confirm or to reschedule, right? Just a regular next in line confirmation. And what happens if, the husband is in the shower, let's say, and the wife sees the husband's phone and it's a text from Peterman Brothers, text C to confirm or to reschedule. And then that the wife calls in from the home's landline and says, hey, we're here, come send the tech. If you're not integrated with dispatching and all that communication, you're not going to know that happened, right? So that agent's going to have no context that, ProBook was in the middle of trying to confirm that appointment, and it's just going to create a disjoint experience. And then when you scale it across, hundreds of other possible edge cases like that, you have to be dialed into dispatch to do, voice right, to do outbound right and do all these other things right. So start with the hardest problem unintentionally. And I think a position as well to just be at the center. And I think on top of that, by being so hands-on and in person with our customers, we just understand them extremely, extremely well. We just get a deeper look at their operations from doing dispatching than if you just touch the call center. So I think we just have like a really good, well-rounded context as well that allows us to almost be peers with our customers, right? And be thought partners rather than, anything else.
So obviously you've onboarded, I don't know how many customers you got, a lot at this point in time, adding new ones every day. I'm sure you see your fair share of people who use time windows, people who don't use time windows, people who use 6 time windows, people who use 2 time windows, all over the place. Give us your and this doesn't have to be like, hey, this one's better, this one's worse, whatever it is, but what are you seeing out there, and what's your opinion on what's the best way to do it?
Yeah. I get asked this a lot, actually. And I do have an opinion. I have a recommendation.
Good.
My recommendation is you run an open window, no time frame model, and you acknowledge customer constraints and you allow some bit of pushback. So what I mean by that is the rough scripting your CSR would follow is, hey, we don't operate on time windows. We can commit to keeping you, completely up to date throughout the day. We'll give you updates. If you have constraints, let us know. We'll communicate and we'll work around those constraints. Go about your day as normal. That's the big next door way. I butchered the scripting a little bit there, but most of us
you work in dispatch, George. It's all right. You don't need to be the call center person. You're good.
Yeah. So you guys get that. And then if the customer is insistent in pushing back, at that point, the best practice is that I recommend is give an AM or PM preference, right? Not a hard commitment, but just a soft preference. That way the customer can feel heard and you guys can have some extra information. If the customer is absolutely insistent that they need a hard commitment, one of the recommendations I see is, first appointments are the only guaranteed appointment because you can guarantee a first appointment. The reason and the argument for going as flexible as possible by starting with open windows and then going into, AM and PM is that when you come from a dispatch optimizing for dollars standpoint, it's not great if you have to see a, 2-year-old tune up over top of a, 20-year-old no heat in the middle of December because of time windows, right? If you have a top tech who's your absolute, dog for age 10 plus systems, and you've got, 2 20-year-old no heats in December, do you really want to have to put one of those on a far lower performing tech just because of time windows? And in some cases, yes, right? Obviously, the longer you wait to run a call, the more likely they are to cancel and go to a competitor. So there is that component as well. The argument is not, the advice is not just not be mindful of cancellation likelihood, but by just setting really clear expectations up front, you allow dispatching, which obviously we're biased towards, to just be more flexible and make more revenue-minded decisions. And you actually save the customer a bit of grief because even if you do these tighter time windows, and you promise a 2-hour window, you promise a 4-hour window, chances are you're not going to hit all of those windows, right? You're going to be late to jobs inevitably. Now you're shifting that burden onto the technician, the field professional, because, the CSR got off easy and gave the customer a window and, made the customer happy and booked. Now the technician needs to hear, from the customer, why are, 3 hours late? So there's going to be lateness, even if you use tight windows. And it's really a question of who do you put the burden on? And obviously you want to book the call. And so that's why I also am recommending that you do have this sequence, if you will, of all day to AM or PM soft preference to first call hard guarantee, which is something you can guarantee to and not be late to, with the caveat that if the customer has a hard constraint, right? If the customer is not home until 2:00, that should be noted, right? That is a hard constraint that you guys would have to accommodate. So that with the hard constraints, I think sets the right expectation with the customer. Your field professional isn't, catching heat for it. And it's freeing you up to be as flexible as possible throughout the day and really, optimize that board.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So that's one dispatch element. Here's the next one that I think is somewhat controversial or probably better said as people are dealing with it. What is your take, or what is your kind of best practice as you've seen umpteen different companies dispatching and then the dreaded rescheduling of appointments? One, what's your take on that? And then two, how does kind of ProBook, I know the answer to this, but how does it help with kind of rescheduling and making that land a little bit better with the customer?
Yeah, I mean, rescheduling is just an unfortunate byproduct of the model we run, which is capacity is a hard problem. You're going to get same day demand and have to make audibles. That's going to make you have to reschedule appointments. You want to run as much as possible, but you also have to take care of your people, right? So Hasty was telling me about how you guys got rid of on call a few years ago, and how your field professionals are your product, right? And so, getting back to the question directly, rescheduling does have to happen. It's common in high demand seasons or shoulder seasons that see spikes in demand because of weather shifts in HVAC at least. And my first thought is ProBook should help you reschedule less because we're optimizing for travel time with an asterisk. Obviously, if you're running ProBook on max revenue, the goal is to make as much money as possible, with the caveat that tighter driving time helps you make more money when you're overbooked because now your best techs can see more calls. So if we're cutting travel time down, you are going to reschedule less. It'd be cool to get some data here on rescheduling ratios. We should look into that. But we're rescheduling less. The key to making a reschedule successful is to do it as early as possible in the day. What the customer cannot stand is when you get through the day and at 6 p.m. you call them and say, hey, we're not going to get you today. That's a terrible customer experience. I don't think anyone would disagree with that. And so the way we address that is we actually tell you which customers to reschedule based off of all the other calls on the board and their jobs. If they've been rescheduled before, we're able to, identify that. We can actually identify that automatically, throw a tag on the job and tell ProBook's model, like, hey, don't reschedule this call. But take the don't reschedules out of the picture. We'll tell you who to reschedule based off of the board and dispatching for dollars. And we can actually text those customers to reschedule better. And we can text them early in the day because ProBook can know, when you're full of demand, you don't need to wait till 6 o'clock to know you have to bump 2-year-old tune-ups. So we can flag that early in the day. It comes up on our Chrome extension, nice and conveniently. And we can actually text those customers automatically at a certain time of day and say, hey, Mrs. Smith, unfortunately, we've received a, large amount of emergency demand today, and we may not be able to get to your appointment. Would you be open to volunteering to reschedule? We've seen some of our customers go as far as to actually offer like an incentive to do that. One of our customers in Wisconsin, Cardinal, they offer, Cardinal cash for reschedules. And it's kind of like the airline model, right? I was on a flight coming back from Charlotte last week, and American Airlines was offering me, money to just take a different flight. And I had some important things to do in person the next day, so it didn't make any sense, and it was the last flight of the night. But you can offer an incentive. You could not offer an incentive, but the key is letting the customer know as early as possible. That's how you execute a reschedule. And look, not everyone's going to be okay with that. There are going to be escalations that people need to manage at that point. There's also, a lot of tune-up customers that are okay with it. And I think the key is just expectation setting. Expectation setting is like a good answer to a lot of things, actually. It works in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're not fully there, but my hope and dream is that like there's a hard and fast rule of we only reschedule a customer once. At that point in time, it locks in. And then the next question is, well, would you take, if that rescheduled call is just I don't know how to work my thermostat over a 15-year-old no heat in the middle of winter? Yeah, I'm going to take care of that customer because to me, that's good customer service and that's what you need to do. That's to me the one time that you're going to opt for the best customer service possible over potentially, a call that could bring you in some dollars. And then to me, it's like, well, we need to shuffle around and figure out how we can go run both calls. But we're not going to reschedule that customer again because to me, that's just telling them that they're not valuable.
Yeah, fully aligned.
What, obviously you guys started in dispatch. You guys have a really good product. Where, like I said, we've been using it since end of May. And I think the biggest thing is what our team had to learn is you're always constantly tweaking it, right? It's like, okay, that didn't work exactly how, okay, let's tweak that. Let's tweak this. And your team's been so gracious with helping ours out and figuring out all the hurdles. We tend to, you've probably figured this out. We tend to make things complex. Our model is complex with multi locations and different trade lines and all of that stuff. But, what's on the, I guess, kind of path for you guys? Like what's next, after dispatch? Like, what are you looking to tackle, and how do you think that fits into kind of the grand scheme of what you guys are trying to build?
Yeah. I mean, there is we spoke about the synergies earlier, but we call it our AI front office. We haven't, stuck on a name exactly yet. But the thinking is we can automate a lot of the adjacent flows. So we've got an AI CSR, that, you guys are using in some capacity. We've got outbounding, right? We can look at how much capacity you have total amongst your techs, how many jobs do we have booked? How much demand do we expect to arrive? And what if we can just automatically text your customers, your members, and have them book their tune-ups and book them when you need them? So, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit and not having to build lists anymore, not having to look at a 3-day call board and a spreadsheet and say, I need, 62 tune-ups next Wednesday. Not having to manually, hit send on all those messages, not having to follow up and actually handle the last mile booking, not having to make sure that you guys are depleting your recurring services correctly, because that's a big pain point for a lot of folks. And so we can generate the demand by, rehashing your customer base. You can also follow up on open estimates, kind of drive more business. Excited, to get that going. We can take your leads in and capture them once we've generated them. So AI CSR, a lot of folks, will start an after hours overflow. A common use case is actually putting this as first line of defense for your non-leads. If you split up your IVR, press 1 to schedule a new appointment, press 2 to ask about an existing appointment. You can put this to the front of the line there because you don't want to tie up your CSRs and your live agents on, answering those ETA updates, which ProBook has a better response to because of how tied in it is with dispatching. You can also capture leads across your aggregators and stuff like that, right? Your LSA chat, your Yelp, your Thumbtack, your Duke Energy. And then it gets to dispatch, right? So communicating with the customer before they get on site, putting the right tech on the right call. And something we do that's actually really underrated, that's, lumped in that dispatch space, is what we call validation. One of the problems we noticed is that if your calls are booked even slightly incorrectly, even if the priority is wrong, even if it's missing a tag or has one erroneous tag, that just breaks all up dispatching, right? Garbage in, garbage out. If you're playing chess with the wrong pieces, you're going to make the wrong decisions. So we built an AI validator that actually listens to all of your phone calls, looks at all your past job notes, invoices, etc., looks at your equipment. It actually cleans up, bad business units, bad job types, bad tags. That's helpful, obviously for any calls or CSRs booked, because it could book them, extremely accurately, but also just make sure all of your other jobs are QA'd correctly as well, because your live agents, they're there to book the call. They're not there to dig into, did I get this business unit perfect? And did I get this job type perfect when you have, 132 job types? And did I get this tag right? And we can get super, super granular in the validator. I mean, we could set up business rules for let's say, I don't know, you guys have attics. You have a customer with a system in their attic, and they tell the CSR on the phone call, hey, my unit's in the attic. Our validator can pick that up on the phone call, put an attic tag on that job, and tell it ProBook that the arrival window has to be in the morning, because in the middle of summer, you don't want your techs working in an attic at 3 p.m. when it's 97 degrees out. So we can get super granular. We can get HVAC age. We can set tie-breaking rules based off of what happens if the customer says their unit is 2 years old, but Service Titan says it's 3. What do you pick? In that case, Service Titan is probably right. But if, the customer says their unit is 6 months and Service Titan says it's 12 years, chances are the customer is right. They got their install done elsewhere. And so that's important info to know. And so tying that all together, basically we can, automate the front end of the funnel by driving demand, capturing demand across voice and channels, communicating with that customer once they're booked before dispatching, validating, make sure their data is right, and ultimately putting the right tech in the right call. And that's the customer journey. So we're really big on the customer journey, and we're excited to get that going and get that more widespread going into 26.
Perfect. Well, here I got you another idea. Not that you guys don't have enough. So this is one thing we're trying to solve right now, and there's a piece of it that's manual, but if it could be automated, it would be a game changer for a lot of people out there. So, like you talked about with call validation, that is huge. The one thing we try to track is our technician and our installer recall rate, right? And so the problem is that recalls, it can be a technician error, or it could simply be a warranty where a part failed. And that's, the technician should not get dinged for, hey, the blower motor failed. Well, if he put the piece of equipment in right and it just failed, that's not really on him. The problem is that we answer, I think about 20% of our booked jobs are via AI call agent. About 30% are online booking. So 50% of our calls, no live human is actually talking to that person. So it's really difficult to validate, was this related to a prior appointment? Now, we've talked about online, you could ask, is this job related to a recent install or something like that? AI, you could probably do it too, but it's still tough to be able to tag that job a warranty job. And then on the back end, the piece where validation would be huge is currently what we have to do is any job that is a quote unquote warranty, a person has to look through the job notes to understand what did the tech, because the customer doesn't know, right? They just know it doesn't work.
Exactly.
We go out there, we diagnose it, we figure out what the problem is. Well, a human has to comb through all that information, every warranty call, and determine, was the technician at fault? Was it a part failure? We get a lot of, the customer didn't understand stumping. Like, they just had us out because they couldn't figure out how to program their stat, or the air coming out of the unit was warmer than when it came out in the old system. Just goofy stuff that's not really a warranty call. Like, that would be that piece. I would assume the front end you could probably do by what the customer's saying. They're probably going to mention, hey, I just had you guys out here, or hey, you just put this damn thing in. On the back end, that would be the interesting piece, is if it could scrape the notes to understand, what was this, a recall and or a warranty call?
Yeah. We actually do scrape the notes now. So
Okay.
we should talk about that for you guys in particular,
Yeah.
offline. But tag notes are such a super valuable resource, right? You can see, pretty much is the issue that the customer is describing related to what the tech was out there last. That's ultimately the logical connection that your people are making currently. And I could see how that's a large time suck, because, maybe your techs were out there a few months ago, and like you said, the customer has no idea that it's linked. So you have to, check anyway and err on the side of caution. So I think that's a great application. It's also great, looking at the notes, you can see kind of cross trade opportunities. Like, if I'm out for plumbing, or, if I'm out for HVAC, if I could see that you had a plumber out there, 9 months ago, and customer's water heater is 13 years old and they scribbled that down somewhere, good information to know when you're, thinking about sending that HVAC tech out. And I know most folks aren't, quite there yet and doing the cross trade, questions in their service system, but it is it is a powerful notion. So pretty I see you taking some notes there. Pretty good pretty aligned with you there.
Yeah, speaking of cross trade, so this is totally off ProBook stuff, but I think it's good information for listeners. Is we created this tool on our, that we call our technician dashboard. So it's outside of Service Titan, but they can see, they have company directory, they have all of their KPIs, and then we built this tool where, because we knew cross trade, so it worked at a lot of our smaller locations because all the guys know each other, right? They all show up at the shop together. They know that, we only got one electrician, and by God, he's got to have calls today. So if he doesn't have enough, I'm hearing it from him. I'm sitting at the shop, I ain't got nothing to do. Well, then the other technicians in the other trades were more apt to say, hey, do you need any electrical work done? Do you need some? My buddy needs some work to do. And so it was really working. We're like, shit, how do we really formalize this so it goes company wide? And so we built this like basically button and created a spiff program for the technicians, so they get a certain dollar amount if it turns into an appointment, and then they get a certain dollar amount based on the job that sells that they turned over. And so the other piece that we knew was happening was customers were asking for other services, and the technician's response was, yeah, just call in the office, they'll get you booked. Well, we know that it maybe sometimes worked, oftentimes probably did not. So we gave them the ability, they can actually book the appointment. So that button, when they click it, they can put in what kind of appointment it is, what it looks like, all of a sudden, all of that. And then it gives them access to our capacity board. So they can actually book the appointment. Well, how's tomorrow work? Yeah, tomorrow will be great. Or later today. Shit, later today works. So we'll punch them in there, and then it tracks them, and then they get spiffs weekly on all of these jobs. So I've got guys out there making thousands of dollars just flipping leads to other trades. Obviously, we do it within departments, an HVAC lead, flip a new system, sewer sales, drain guy flips a lead to sewer sales. But the cross trade stuff it's crazy the amount. We ran it for a month, 1 month we launched. So we launched it beginning of October. By the end of October, we had set up 151 jobs for other trades in a month's time, which resulted in, I think it was like, I want to say $200,000 worth of revenue in 1 month that we probably otherwise wouldn't have captured. And that $200,000 of revenue cost us like $2,500 and spiffs. It's like, that's the cheapest damn lead I've ever bought in my entire life. So yeah, there's so much capability, and I think ProBook does it, right? It's like, how do I mine the customers that I already have to get the right tech to the right call? Look at all the stuff so that we can cross sell it. All of these things where I feel like business owners are always just searching for, well, how much more money do I need to spend in marketing? And it's like, you have so many dollars underneath your nose if you're able to operate efficiently and get these things done. And I think that's what tools like ProBook allow you to do. It's really maximize the calls that you're running on a daily basis.
Was that were those 151 jobs just Indy or Peterman wide?
Peterman wide. 151 jobs.
Still doing that?
Oh yeah, we'll never stop. We're thinking of ways like, how can we make it more lucrative? How can we make it better? There's all. Well, what I want to set up next is a partner program. So I already did it with my roofing company. So essentially, my hope is that as people are asking, technicians outside cleaning off the air conditioner notices, hey, your siding could use some power washing. Well, we have a power washing vendor that's in there that they could then refer over. Technician gets a spiff, company gets a spiff, they get another job. Like, to me, you could create this whole partner program where all the services that you don't offer or will never offer, to me, you can be trading leads back and forth. And again, helping customers out. Hey, you need this? Yeah, we have a partner that we vetted. They're good. They'll take care of you.
I think the ability to just directly schedule, I guess.
Oh my God, it's huge.
When you think of external partners, maybe it gets a little more difficult, but internally, I mean, that's kind of like a non-negotiable, like such a, and it seems so like innocuous, so simple, like just have a direct interface to a schedule. So the stuff that you guys have built, internally, kudos to you guys. You have a lot of innovations that, have been fun to integrate with, and, definitely have a lot of value.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, your team as well. I mean, heck, I was on a call today, I think, with every developer you have. I don't know if you have any more, but there were like 6 of them on there. Your guys' ability to, and willingness, I think, is the better way to put it. Willingness to collaborate. That call was simply like, hey, we're building this product. How do you think about it? So that we can build it right the first time, as opposed to taking a stab at it and you come back and say, hey, these 8 things don't work or stupid. They don't even work for our business. Like, you guys' willingness, and that's what I've always told people about you guys, is you guys got in the weeds early. And I think that's critical because then you start to understand the problems. When we have a problem here, we bring our developers into the meeting and go, hey, this is what we're trying to solve. Oh, well, that's not too hard. We can do that. We just do it like this, and then it'll flow like this. So, I can't thank you guys enough for how you guys attack problems, because I think together we're hopefully doing our part to help you guys create something really cool that, again, we get to take advantage of as well. I know that I know we're kind of running up against time here, and I know you're busy. What is I'm sure that people are interested in this. I'm sure they've seen you, heard you, all of this stuff. My hope is that my kind of endorsement of like, hey, these guys are for real. We're using them. It's working really well, and we're just getting started. I think that's the scary part. Is we've already seen a lot of great stuff, and like there's like 4 or 5 more things to roll out that we're slowly, progressively rolling out. What's like the best way if someone's listening to this and they're like, hey, this sounds like something I need to look into? Like, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you? And we'll obviously put your contact information in the notes and all that stuff, but what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Yeah, that's one. This is the second podcast I've really done, and on the first one I gave out my personal cell.
Yeah, don't do that, George.
And
Come on, you guys are getting too big to be doing that. Yeah,
I'm
you guys are
past
getting too
that.
big.
We have our website ProBook.ai. We actually just hired our first salesperson ever. Like today, it's just
Good.
been all inbound. It's been all me. So I'm fortunate to have a counterpart now that can help with this. So his name's Adam. It's Adam at ProBook.ai. Send him an email if you want some quick. I mean, you can get responded to quickly on the website as well. But Adam's the man. I'll likely be involved in as well if I have some time. But you're spot on, Chad. That today is the worst that the AI customer experience will ever be. Right, going forward, it's just going to keep getting better, and really grateful for the opportunity to partner with you guys and spend the time we can with your team and build something great. And thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely. Well, George, kudos to you and your team for what you've built. It is truly special. Excited to be a part of it. Excited to help in any way that we can. For listeners, I think the biggest thing is whether you use ProBook or not. Again, it like George said, it's not for everybody. And frankly, in looking at it, if you're not already on top of your numbers, if you don't have clear KPIs and goals and know where you want to go, this tool will not fix your business. It's not going to fix it. You've got to know the building blocks of what makes your business run, and then you layer this on, and it just gets more efficient. You're able to deliver better customer service, able to take care of more customers, and ultimately your business grows. So with that, the biggest thing you can do is dive into those numbers. You need to know your booking rate. You need to know your batting order. You need to know all the things that we've been talking about today. You've got to know those building blocks in order to be successful. So again, George, thanks for being on the podcast. Listeners, get out there and make 2026 your best year yet. Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to connect with me personally, you can find me at chadmpeterman.com. To see what our team's up to, you can visit petermanbros.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel and consider joining the CSTG Arena. As always, keep growing out there.